This week on the WriterCon podcast,
I would encourage them to network with other writers and readers and people in the literary world.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Lara Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Thank you, Jesse Ulrich. And hey there, writers. Thanks for joining us. I feel like we're in the lull in the storm today. We've finished the cruise, but the retreat is in July, just a little ways ahead of us as we record this. And of course, the big conference, WriterCon itself, is Labor Day weekend. But the biggest news for me, of course, is that you can now order my new book, which is called Justice for All. It's the 8th Daniel Pike novel. And he's in a courtroom showdown with Kenzi Rivera, the attorney from my Splitsville series of novels. So yes, it's another Bernhardt shared universe. Let me try that again. The BSU, the Bernhardt Shared Universe event. That's what it is. Okay, Lara, you're the only person present who's read it, so I'm turning to you. Well, fair. I've read it, I suppose, several times, but you know what I mean. Yeah. And I'm sure you can be totally objective.
Completely. Yes.
When reviewing your husband's book.
Yes.
So maybe I better not ask you if it's any good, actually. But I will ask, was there anything that stood out or a favorite moment? I'm hoping you're going to set up what I actually want to say, but
a favorite moment. Let me think. A favorite moment. It's enjoyable to see
this in advance.
Kenzi and Dan go after each other. That back and forth is kind of delicious. It's awful, but it's delicious. It's funny to see the two going after each other. But I think for me, maybe the most fun thing about it is that it has illustrations in it.
That's what I didn't have to tell you. You read my mind.
You don't have to. We don't expect that from novels these days. But that has been a lot of fun.
It's set in the comic book industry, and it's about a dispute over a particular comic book character. And so I actually commissioned a guy to draw, I said, in the 1960s Jack Kirby style. So he did 6 covers for me for this comic character I made up, King Kaiju, kind of, like Godzilla in a superhero costume. But I mean, that's not what the book is about. The book is this courtroom drama, but that's what they're fighting over because his characters become worth billions. And
we get to see them.
Yeah.
And they look
Dan
so legit. Honestly, I wasn't sure it was okay to mention that. I didn't know if you were like hoping that people would get the book and then be like surprise and you would spring that on them. So I was a little concerned. I wasn't going to give away too much, but I thought maybe if I just said the illustrations, that would be okay. Yay. That
was good. Okay, Jesse, I'm dragging you into this extended commercial now.
Yes.
You're familiar with shared universes, right? I am. You've seen the Avengers. So here's your trivia question, which I'm just telling everybody I did not put in any script for this show. He's on its own. It's Final Jeopardy question for you. What writer created the first shared universe? No, I won't do that song because then I'd have to send the Merv Griffins.
Yeah, we won't do that. First writer.
Shared universe. Or so his descendants claim, if that gives you a hint. And I think they're right, I have to say.
Descendants. Okay, so not older than I was originally thinking. All right. I feel like I did know this at some point, but I've forgotten.
Early 20th century, 5, 4.
Jules Verne.
No, but when I was preparing this, I thought,
who is Jules Verne? No.
Because Captain Nemo does appear in more than one book, so that at least links those together. Yeah. But no, I think the real answer here is Edgar Rice Burroughs. People, of course, remember for Tarzan, but also his John Connor on Mars series, which actually some people like better than the Tarzan books, but Tarzan was the big moneymaker. Plus, there was Carson of Venus on Venus, and there was David Ennis in Pellucidar. which is the underground, like Skartaris, the city in the center of the earth. And in book 16, Tarzan goes down to Pellucidar, and they invent the Gridley wave, so all these guys can start talking to each other. And pretty soon it is clearly one incredible, crazy Edgar Rice Burroughs shared universe.
The Burrowverse?
When you said, according to Descendants, that's the name that popped into my head, but I never would have said that because I did not realize, I wasn't aware of that. So I didn't realize that he had actually brought some of his characters together.
Yeah, he did it. So
honestly, I was thinking Jane Austen was the other one I was going to throw out there because, like, I feel like at some point those books crossed over in like a very small way, and you just didn't realize it at the time.
All the neighbors lived together,
I don't think they did, but wouldn't that be? I'm going to go home and write that.
Right?
Yes, that would be so fun.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, till I write that one, Justice for All.
Yes, buy this one
Daniel
first.
Pike.
So he has enough money to write this other
it's
one.
ready now.
Right.
This one's ready now, so go get it.
Yeah.
All right. We are going to interview Caroline Cleveland, who is the author of When Cicadas Cry. This is a wonderful thriller. The Advance Press is calling it John Grisham meets Harper Lee, and that's not a very bad tagline, I would have to say. We will talk to her about this book and much more, but first, the news. News story number 1. Shouldn't surprise you since the whole rest of the world is talking about AI. Why wouldn't we? But the topic here is that publishers are beginning to add contract clauses relating to AI in different ways to their publishing contracts with authors. According to Publishers Lunch, which is part of Publishers Weekly, at least 3 of the big 5 publishers, specifically Penguin Random House and Hachette and Macmillan, are adding contract languages to prohibit publishers from using this contracted work of the author to train AI models or to sell it or license it to someone else to train for AI models. In at least one of these houses, this language has to be requested by your agent, which is a good reason to have agents, but I'm sure the author could do it themselves. In other cases, it's just now part of the boilerplate contract. Random House is still reserving the right to use your work specifically, to train their own AI tools, like we can do it, but nobody else can. I'm not sure that's really better if they're still not paying you an additional fee for that, but whatever, that's how it goes. Some of these are welcome contractual changes. I mean, we've got to keep pace with what's going on out there, but some people, and particularly agents, don't want to make broad contract changes when there are still so many unknowns about AI. Authors are worried about AI being used in cover design or editing or translating even, or audio narration. And we really don't know where this is going yet. So it's hard to know how to address it in a contract. Jesse, is this happening too soon? I mean, it feels like we're barely beginning to understand what AI can even do.
No, but I think we know enough now to like protect ourselves from the issues that we are dealing with right now, which is like just the sucking up of all data on the internet and being fed to AIs to teach them things, and protecting people's rights as far as like what is being fed to these machines and what isn't. And so sort of protecting that, and also like protecting artists from like not having their stuff being thrown into, an AI thing for like book covers and all that kind of stuff. Like sort of just like protecting what's being fed to these large language models. That's the thing we know at this moment. So like, I'm okay adding some of that stuff, but you're right. You do have to be careful because it might not matter a year from now the way you phrased it. So,
but you mentioned the music industry. It's kind of interesting to me that, the music industry is like putting up a big stop sign, I think, for the most part, saying no AI nowhere near us, whereas a lot of authors, particularly those who aren't with big publishers now, are using AI to generate audiobooks or trailers or whatever, not to write the books, but cover design, things like that. Lara, this is happening, and some writers feel strongly about not wanting AI to have any part in their work, but whether they like it or not, many publishers, including major publishers, are now using AI for all those things I listed a minute ago: cover design, editing, even translation into foreign languages, audio narration. How do you feel about that?
I've seen so much junk produced by AI that I'm not a big fan yet, not for creation. In fact, I've already checked the no box as far as cover design. Is it okay if we use AI in your cover design? I said no. I haven't seen something that leads me to think that AI can really create something super useful yet.
Mm-hmm.
I also firmly believe that you need a real human when you are editing. There are just so many things that are suggested to me by what's basically early AI, which is in a Word document, you get those suggestions for things, and sometimes it's wrong. I really think we need a human for a lot of these things to make the best work possible.
Right. There are
I
a
don't
lot of
think we're ready
programs out
yet.
there, and people are buying them, AutoCrit, and I know there are others that, you pay a fee and this computer, meaning an AI, looks at your manuscript and gives you feedback. And I'm not passing judgment on the program I mentioned because I've never used it, but I do know there are people who love using these programs. In part, I think I don't know, it's just more fun to play with a gadget, but I don't know. People are doing it, right?
If someone finds some use from that, if it can help you take your manuscript to the next step, I would never discourage someone from that. I have a different opinion of editing it. I consider it an appropriate use of AI if it's something that an editor could help you do. And we're not talking about creation at that point. We're talking about trying to tweak what you've made and make it better. And so in that regard, if someone's using it to analyze what they've written and maybe get some potentially helpful feedback on how to improve it, and they think that it helps them and it can maybe get them the next step, that I would be okay with that.
Well, a lot of interesting issues raised, and we don't know all the answers, which I guess is why some people are saying breaks.
Yeah, if you actually ask me for a solution, I'm gonna hard pass on trying to come up with one of those.
Yeah.
I don't have that for you. And as far as translation services go, I would worry about that kind of the same way I would. I think you need a human actually doing that, because there are so many colloquialisms and so many things that we say that don't directly translate from one to another. You need a human brain behind that to make it really turn out well, in my opinion.
Right. But what if the AI program did the first draft, which was about 90% of the work or more, and then somebody else came along and fixed the boo-boos? Wouldn't that reduce the cost authors would have to pay to get a foreign translation?
The person, the human doing it, I would imagine, would still have to go over it pretty much the entire book. Like, yes, I think it would save time. I don't think it would save as much time as people think it would, because you still have to read, just like when I edit an audiobook, right? I still have to re-listen to the entire book, even after it's been recorded, just to double check.
To double check. And I don't know. I wouldn't trust it. I would still be worried that it had mistranslated too much. And if you have a person coming along behind, if they haven't seen the original and they're not doing the whole thing, they might not realize where it has skewed the intended original writing, and won't know how to correct it, perhaps. And as far as audio narration, I don't know. Jesse's spoken to this one for sure, that we need that human element. I Oof, that's a big one. That's a big one. And I am still kind of vacillating on where I fall on that. I know sometimes people would argue that you don't want to cut the artist out of the equation. And some people argue it's too expensive to have to go pay someone. I've been very fortunate that I worked with a narrator who was willing to just do a royalty share with me. So I didn't have to pay her up front, and she did a great job. I loved working with her. There are some books I have, though, that she didn't think she would be the appropriate voice for. And so it's, do I go out and look for someone else to do those books? I don't know. I was looking into it, and it's a tough one for me. I haven't really come down on one side or the other yet.
Still early days.
Yeah.
Quickly, let's tackle news story number 2, which, since we already had one on AI, this has got to be about Amazon, right? And indeed it is. Amazon is testing what they call book trends data on the product detail pages. In other words, those pages where you see books and a lot of stuff underneath it. You may have noticed there's some new information on some search and book detail pages. Jesse's got a screenshot, but even if you can't see that, go on Amazon, you'll find it. There's a box, beneath the title, and it's got the average star rating. It always has the Goodreads statistic, and then an additional statistic showing how many people have bought or read your book in the past month, including ebook and audiobook sales. Amazon says, and here I'm quoting, "This information is updated daily and accounts for customer engagement across all of a book's formats. Book trends data is not a sales report. It is meant to give an indication of customer engagement. And the numbers you see in your sales report will not be comparable," which is sort of like saying we're throwing numbers out, but don't take them seriously or something. I don't know, Jesse, what does that mean? What does any of this mean?
I think they're just trying to give you an indication that, sort of like in sort of the book talk fashion, that there are other people reading or thinking about this book. And if you're trying to decide between two books and you see, like, for example, that 394,000 people clicked want to read on Goodreads, I'm like, that's a goodly amount of people. So maybe I'll check that out. Right. But if I see like only, 3,000 people want to read, I'm like, nah.
That's not enough, huh?
It's just adding to the information you're given about how popular or interesting a book is.
Right. Laura, as I'm sure you know, some authors have expressed anger or frustration because they consider this sales data, how well is my book doing, to be private. And now it's being made completely public by Amazon. Are you okay with this?
It's a little, you can kind of scroll down to like category rank, and kind of gauge where it's at. But like Jesse was saying, if this is going to sway somebody from one to another, is this just another way of promoting books that are already getting plenty of love? What if you were leaning towards the book that was just more recently released, it hadn't quite picked up the steam yet, and it steered you away from that book because you didn't see that there was enough engagement yet? I think when when new authors are starting out, it's tough enough to get that initial traction built and moving without putting huge amounts of marketing money behind it. That's my concern here, is that somebody will look at that and think, well, if it doesn't have 900,000 people already interested in reading it, must not be worth it. But it could be a great read that you're missing out on.
Yeah. Do you think people would look at that? I mean, I know people shop on stars and they shop on price, but ranking, the rankings have always been there, and I don't really think that's what people base buying decisions on, but I could be wrong.
I mean, if we did, we'd all be reading James Patterson books, right? So
And you would be so happy about that.
I'd be so unhappy.
All right. Enough of that, Jesse. Cue up some music. Let's talk to Caroline Cleveland. Caroline, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. You can't see it, but I'm wagging.
Okay, traditional first question. If you could offer writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would encourage them to network with other writers and readers and people in the literary world, because I work as a lawyer in my day job, and I have a lot of friends and contacts there from my 30 years practice in law, but it doesn't always translate. It's a whole different world, and you need people, and there's just so much you don't know. So I would encourage them to get to know that community so that they have a network and a tribe.
That's great advice. Of course, I would say
Really
that because
good.
that's what WriterCon is kind of all about.
Hey, well, that's exactly what we need.
Yeah, great. And tell us about When Cicadas Cry.
Well, When Cicadas Cry is a Southern legal thriller. It's set in Walterboro, South Carolina, which is where I happen to grow up, and nearby Edisto Beach. It takes place in 2017 and in the aftermath of the Mother Emanuel Church massacre, which was just down the street from my house, and the Walter Scott shooting was police shooting of an unarmed Black suspect. So our little community, racial tensions were high, and it was a tough time. And so it's against that backdrop that my book opens.
Sounds suspenseful.
Pretty
Good
secret.
work.
Wow. that sounds very powerful. I'm
It's
ready.
also-
I'm adding that to my TBR
You go.
list.
You go. That sounds great.
So you touched a little bit on what inspired. It sounds like you were pulling ideas from events that were happening there.
Absolutely.
So how did it all come together? How did you pull together the idea of the book? And did it just kind of hit you? You had this great idea, or was it something that gestated over time?
This one came in waves, if you will. The idea of a lawyer working a case with no idea at all that it was connected to something older than he was, and kind of in the dark about that connection, came to me a long time ago. And I really wanted a male and a female protagonist, because I've noticed with my husband, we'll trade books. With most women, I don't want to make a stereotype, but I find more often female readers are more willing to step into the skin of a male protagonist than sometimes the other way around. So I wanted both. I wanted everybody to have something in the story.
Somebody to connect with. That's great.
That's right. So I had my two protagonists, and that was in my head for a long time, just trying to play with how an old case might come in. And I had always had some racial component in that there was a Black defendant and a white victim, but that was not really the main thrust of my story. And then all of a sudden, the world just came down here around us. I mean, that night that guy killed those 9 people in a Bible study, that was rock your world kind of stuff. And
I can imagine.
It was, I mean, it's 3 blocks from my house. It's just so hard to believe that could happen anywhere, much less where you live. And the 2 cases, that and the police shooting, came to trial the same week in December. And the hate crime was tried as a federal hate crime, and was in the federal court. Right across the street in our state court was the murder case of the police officer. So, I mean, we had CNN and Fox trucks, and I mean, it was just, you couldn't look away. I lived near both events. I practiced in both those courts. I knew the lawyers trying the case. I knew the judges trying the case.
Wow.
I knew that I had used the expert before, who was the guy who evaluated the killer to make sure he was legally competent, mentally competent to stand trial. And so, I mean, it was just, there was no getting away from this. And as I'm writing my story, and all of a sudden it dawns on me, if they're in 2017, they are going to be affected by this. There's no way that doesn't change the story. And then the story started changing my mind. And all I ever set out to do was to write a twisty, clever mystery. I had no grand design of writing a socially conscious or a socially important novel, but somewhere along the way, my characters realized they had something more thought-provoking to say, and I just kind of rolled with it. I hope I did a good job with it. I'm sure if I didn't, I'll hear from it. There are not many,
Right.
not many subjects you can pick that evoke the kind of strong and raw emotion that race does. So I've tried to be sensitive, and above all, I've tried to be respectful.
Well, judging from the reviews I've seen, you did it very well.
Thank you.
Very good. So clearly, your personal experiences influence this book. So I know when I'm writing and I draw from real life experiences, I fictionalize pretty heavily. Can you tell me, did you feel the need to do that as well, or did you find that it was you were using more of things that actually did happen to you and just applying them to the book?
No, obviously I talk about the events and I talk about the social setting, what's going on, and Walterboro is a real place, but my story is completely fiction. The church that this happens in is fiction. The investigations that are going on, and now I'm sure some people are going to say this was really the Murdaugh murder, but it has not a thing in the world to do with Murdaugh because it's in the same courtroom.
Right.
It's 2017. The Murdaughs were long since gone from the solicitor's office, and Alex had not yet had his inglorious fall. So it has nothing to do with it. But I just happened to grow up in that same little town.
Sure. Your bio says you not only grew up in that little town, but you grew up reading Agatha Christie and Stephen King, which are not exactly similar. Are there elements of both in this book?
I love all kind of books. I mean, like I said, I started on Old Yeller and kind of went on down the line. So there aren't many genres. I don't read any science fiction or fantasy, but other than that, just about everything has something in it that I love. I have a special affinity for Southern fiction. I love Flannery O'Connor. And Grisham, I think, paints Southern, small town Southerners just truly a gift. Sometimes I think he stumbled over my high school yearbook.
And they're all in it, huh?
All the criminals. Thank goodness there were no cell phones back then. There's no evidence of anything.
Right. You mentioned practicing law. You couldn't tell it to look at you, but your bio says you've been practicing law for 30 years.
And I didn't go straight through school, so I'm an old woman, but thank you for your comment.
Well, okay. So what has caused you to turn to writing now?
I've been playing with it. I guess it's somewhere around 2014 when I first just, it dawns on me. I work with a lot of law enforcement clients and a lot of cities and counties, public entities. I get to see all kind of stuff. And I don't think I could have written in my 30s the kind of books I can write now. I didn't have the life experience. You just see what goes on in the paper. You don't see what's in the back room that made it happen. And I started thinking, I've got some stories to tell too. So, and I think it was 2014, I said, I can write a novel. I know I can. So I sat down, I started typing, finished up my novel, got it all done and read over it, and crap, I couldn't write a novel after all. It stunk up the place. So I said
that was my path as well. My first experience.
I said maybe I need to go to a little class or something, WriterCon or something. I need some help. so I did, and I slowly got better. And then I wrote and finished a novel, and that novel landed me an agent, but not a publisher. So then we sent it to this publisher, and they liked it very much, but they didn't. I guess they're looking at my life track and they're saying, we want to make sure you're not going to we're going to waste our time and you're only going to do one book and not be interested anymore. So they said, can you show us something you're working on? And I had not yet finished the Cicada book. And I sent it, and Marley called me back, my agent, Marley Rusoff, wonderful, wonderful woman. She said, she starts talking, we've sold the book, and I'm listening to her, and I'm listening. Go, wait, Marley, you're talking about the wrong book. That book's not ready. It's not written. And she says, well, congratulations, you got 4 months. So it worked out.
Oh boy. Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. So we have quite a few aspiring writers in our audience. So while we're talking about your path to publication, let's see, you told us how you got started. This was back in 2014. And then how long did it take you? Exactly. That was the start of your journey. How long was it then? How long did it take you to
My
knock
first
that
book is
out?
not
And
yet.
then
Yeah, my first book will be published next week, so you can do the math. It's been doing, what is that,
there you go.
10 years?
Okay. Yes. Okay. I think that's not uncommon. And did you do the traditional, you finished up? Did you start sending query letters, or how did you find your agent?
We're at a conference, a small conference. Marley, she has an office or an agency in New York, and she also has a home in Beaufort, South Carolina. And in fact, she was one of the founders of the Pat Conroy Literary Center that's there.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
and that's such a great resource. We don't live near New York. We don't have the kind of big conferences and things that people have there. And anyway, I went to a conference. It was a 3-day thing. They took over an old historic inn, and they kind of locked. It was like a locked room kind of mystery. So we all kind of read each other's books or read excerpts of our books and got to know each other. And Marley was one of the agents there. And Marley, she didn't really seem interested in my book. That one was a psychological thriller, and I didn't think she liked it. And she and I hit it off so well. I thought, rather than blow up a baby relationship, I'd rather keep her as a mentor. So I didn't ask her to represent me. Instead, I asked her if she could hook me up with a really good professional editor. And that editor turned out to be Claire Wachtel, who is now my editor at Union Square. After she had looked at my first book, she took a job, and God has a plan. We just don't get to know it on the front end, I guess.
That is unique. I have not heard that exact path. That's very, very unique. How fun.
Two crazy smart, insanely talented, fabulous, wonderful women had not just stumbled over me and noticed my writing and taken an interest in me, I would still have a box of stuff nobody's ever read. So I'm very grateful.
That's great. And the power of conferences, right?
And Little Girl Nation.
So much. Yeah. So what does your typical writing day look like? How do you find writing time? You just said
I can't wait to find it. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you do that? And I understand. I also continue to work as well, so I get it. But how do you make writing time?
You just have to be a good manager of it, because there are days it's slower, and maybe I can pop that thumb drive in there and work on a little bit when I expected to be here. If I work a lot of weekends, but when I get a weekend off, that's generally the better time, because I can lock myself in. I don't have to, all those pesky paying clients aren't bothering me. But it's nice to be needed. I'm just teasing. They know that I love them. Most of my clients have been my clients for 20 years and have become friends and confidants and comrades, and we've been in a lot of trenches together and had a lot of experiences. I really welcome their calls.
It's fantastic. What's your process like? Are you a planner? Are you a pantser? How do you like to work on a novel?
Best analogy I can have is back when we had those big paper maps. Yeah. I pitted it, and I'm going to leave Charleston, and I'm going to go to somewhere in Tennessee, and I'd stick my pins in, but I don't know how I'm going yet. That's kind of it. I know where the book starts. I know what the premise is. I know how it ends. But whether I'm going to take back roads or interstates or stop somewhere and hop on a bus, I don't know. I just that part I just let fly.
Okay.
That's all right. Now, some of the PR I read for this book said that it, and here I'm quoting, introduces attorney Zach Standler. Does that mean we can expect to see Zach again in the future?
I'm going to write Zach again in the future. If enough people buy this book, they might let me publish that second one too. So get out there and buy a copy on sale Tuesday.
I think that reminds me, I want to tell our audience, you were talking about book being published Tuesday or next week. Everybody listening to this, it's on sale now by the time you're listening to this interview. So you can go get it. When Cicadas Cry immediately.
Yeah.
And you should. Okay, one last question, Caroline. What are you working on next? You said maybe Zach, maybe not. So what are you working on now, I should say?
I have two things I'm working on now. One is another psychological thriller. I know where it's going, but I'm having a hard time getting the voice right. When you're dealing with something that's it just is harder. And I actually am already working on what might be a sequel to Zach and Addie. A little bit different kind of book, though less mystery and more action, maybe. I'm trying to be careful.
I was going to suggest a word, but it wouldn't have been right. Probably so action. Okay.
Action.
Good. Oh, that sounds
a little more
terrific.
blowing stuff up.
Well, you get that one done. You need to come back on the podcast, okay?
I can't wait.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Caroline. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye-bye. Just a few parting words. Laura, tell us all about the forthcoming WriterCon Retreat.
I'm so looking forward to this. I'm so ready. I'm ready to get away, get out of town, and go relax in a spa resort. There's 300 acres, and we're going to have this place all to ourselves. We've got rooms, we've got cottages, the spa's there. People who enjoy golfing, there's golf, there's hiking, there's a pool. Oh, wait, we're going to be writing too, aren't we?
Yeah,
That's right.
There is
We're
a writing
gonna
retreat thing going on, but
Yes.
selling the location fabulously.
Well, I keep pulling up the cane brake and drooling over it when I get a little bit stressed out at work, because I keep thinking, okay, not too much longer now, and we'll go relax. I do need to get away and relax. But meanwhile, while we're relaxing, Bill and I will be there for you. We'll come together. We'll talk about whatever you need to work on with your writing. Whoever comes, you are going to get to choose what it is that we talk about every day. You're also going to get daily, probably, feedback on your manuscripts. You're going to bring what you're working on, and we're going to sit down and work on it with you. This is something that you just can't put a price on, honestly. This kind of feedback is absolutely invaluable, and it's the way to really take your novel to the next level.
Yeah, not to brag. Well, this is totally bragging, but we have had a lot of people come out of these retreats and publish their work with serious publishers later on. So come join us, because we would love to work with you. All right. Until next time, hey, writers, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.